It was a cold morning in the city, the kind of winter day that makes people hurry along the streets, pulling their coats tighter and tucking their hands into their pockets. Most people were thinking only of getting to work, to school, or to wherever they needed to be. But Pastor James had a different kind of morning planned. He had started his day early, as he always did, walking through the park near his church. He liked to see the city wake up slowly, to watch people moving past him, and sometimes, just sometimes, to notice someone who might need a helping hand. As he walked along the familiar path, his eyes caught sight of a young boy sitting alone on a cold, worn-out bench. The boy's clothes were tattered, his shoes were broken, and his small frame shivered with every gust of wind. His face was hidden beneath the hood of a jacket that had seen better days, but Pastor James could see enough to know that the boy was hungry, cold, and most likely alone. Pastor James slowed his pace. He had seen people in need before, of course, but something about this boy made him pause. Maybe it was the way the boy hugged himself tightly or the quiet sadness in his eyes. Pastor James knew that he couldn't just walk by. He reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a small sandwich he had packed for himself, and knelt down to the boy's level. "Hey there," he said softly. "Are you all right?" The boy looked up startled and then quickly looked away. His voice was barely a whisper. I'm fine," he said. Pastor James shook his head gently. "You don't look fine to me. It's really cold out here and you don't have proper shoes. You don't even have a coat that keeps you warm." The boy hesitated, then shrugged. He didn't seem to expect anyone to care, so when Pastor James offered him the sandwich, he looked at it as if it were something strange, something he didn't deserve. Hunger, though, won out over pride. He took it with trembling hands and took a small bite, savoring it like it was the best meal he had ever had. Pastor James stayed with him, talking gently, asking questions without being pushy. "What's your name?" he asked. "Malik," the boy replied. The word was almost lost in the wind, but Pastor James caught it. "Malik," he repeated with a smile. "That's a strong name. And where do you live, Malik?" The boy's eyes went down to the ground. I don't really have a home," he admitted quietly. Pastor James felt a pang in his chest. He had known that homelessness was common in the city, but hearing it directly from a child made it different. It made it real. "You don't have anyone to take care of you?" he asked gently. Malik shook his head. He didn't answer with words. His silence said more than any sentence could. Pastor James understood that look. He had seen it before in people who felt invisible, who felt forgotten by the world. Pastor James didn't try to push him or lecture him. He just sat there with him on the bench, sharing the warmth of human presence. After a while, he said, "You know, Malik, I run a small church not far from here. We try to help kids, people who need a little support. Would you like to come by and have some hot food? You can rest and we'll see about helping you get some warm clothes too." Malik looked at him unsure. He had been let down so many times before. People had promised things, then disappeared. But something in Pastor James's voice, the kindness in his eyes, made him hesitate less than he normally would. "Okay," he said finally. The walk to the church wasn't far, but Malik shivered with every step. Pastor James gave him his coat to wear, noticing immediately how ill-fitting and worn it was. Inside the church, the warmth hit Malik instantly. The smell of cooking food, the soft murmur of voices, and the sight of people smiling made him feel almost like he was somewhere safe for the first time in a long time. Pastor James introduced him to some volunteers, people who worked with the church to feed and care for the homeless. They offered him a plate of food, and for the first time that morning, Malik's small smile appeared. It was hesitant, but it was real. He ate slowly, savoring every bite as if he were afraid it might disappear. After the meal, Pastor James sat down with Malik again. "I want to help you, Malik," he said. "I can't promise it will be easy, and I can't promise it will happen overnight. But I can promise that I will not give up on you. We'll get you warm clothes, shoes, and make sure you have somewhere to stay at night. And I'll help you go back to school so you can have a future that's better than this." Malik looked at him, eyes wide. No one had ever said words like that to him before. Most people had looked away or scolded him, telling him he should do better without offering any help. Pastor James wasn't just talking. His tone, his actions, the way he cared, it all made Malik believe that he might finally have someone on his side. Over the next few days, Pastor James and the church volunteers worked hard to get Malik the things he needed. They found him a small bed at a nearby shelter and made sure he had proper clothes. Pastor James even bought him a pair of sturdy shoes which Malik inspected carefully, almost afraid to put them on. But it wasn't just about food, clothes, or shelter. Pastor James spent hours talking to Malik, asking about his dreams, his fears, and even the little things that made him happy. He learned that Malik loved drawing and was fascinated by stories about people who overcame impossible challenges. Pastor James encouraged him to draw more, to write down his thoughts, and to dream bigger than the streets he had been living on. Slowly, Malik began to open up. He started telling Pastor James small stories about his life, how he had lost his parents, how he had survived on the streets, and how lonely he felt. The more he shared, the more Pastor James listened, never judging, never rushing him. He understood that Malik had been through trauma that no child should endure, and he knew that healing would take time. Pastor James didn't just help Malik survive. He helped him feel human again. He reminded him that he was important, that his life mattered, and that he was capable of more than just struggling to get by. And Malik, who had been so used to feeling invisible, started to feel seen for the first time. One day, as they walked back from the shelter to the church, Malik asked Pastor James, "Why are you helping me? You don't even have to care about me." Pastor James smiled softly. "Because someone once helped me when I was in trouble and it changed my life. I can't forget that and I can't ignore it. Helping you isn't just about what I do, it's about what I know is right. You deserve a chance, Malik, just like I did." Malik nodded slowly. He didn't fully understand everything Pastor James was saying, but he felt it in his heart. He felt a warmth and a hope that had been missing from his life for years. From that day on, Malik's life began to change, step by step. He didn't know how far he would go or how difficult things might still be, but he knew he had someone who believed in him. Pastor James had given him more than shelter or food. He had given him hope. The kind that grows quietly but strongly, the kind that can change a life forever. And so, their journey together began, not with grand gestures or sudden miracles, but with a simple act of kindness on a cold winter morning, a sandwich, a coat, and a listening ear. It was the beginning of a story that neither of them could yet imagine would reach so far. A story about hope, faith, and the power of one person believing in another. Little did Malik know, that day, that the kindness shown by Pastor James would not only change his life but would also set the stage for a moment, years later, when he would find a way to repay that kindness in ways neither of them could have dreamed. After that cold winter morning, Malik's life began to slowly change, but it wasn't easy. Even though he now had a warm coat, shoes, and regular meals, he still carried the weight of his past. Years on the streets had left scars that no new clothing or hot meals could erase. He struggled to trust people, worried that anyone who showed kindness would disappear the next day, leaving him alone again. Pastor James understood this. He knew that helping Malik survive was only the first step. What mattered more was giving him confidence, guidance, and a sense of belonging. So every day after church and community work, Pastor James would sit with Malik and talk to him about life. Sometimes they would walk together through the quiet streets near the park, and sometimes they would just sit on a bench and watch the world go by. "Malik," Pastor James said one afternoon as they walked, "you know, the world isn't always kind. Some people will hurt you, and some people will ignore you. But that doesn't mean you have to become hard or stop believing in goodness. You can be strong and kind at the same time. That's a choice you get to make every day." Malik listened quietly. He had never heard words like that before. Most adults had told him to toughen up, to stop crying, to fend for himself. But Pastor James spoke differently. His words felt real and they felt safe. For the first time, Malik started to imagine that maybe, just maybe, he could grow up to be more than a boy on the streets. School was a challenge at first. Malik had missed years of education while living on the streets. Reading and writing felt difficult, and he sometimes felt frustrated when he couldn't keep up with the other students. Some kids were unkind, teasing him for his old clothes or for being behind in class. There were days when Malik wanted to give up entirely, to retreat into the streets where life was harsh but predictable. Pastor James never let him give up. Every evening he would sit with Malik and help him with homework, patiently explaining concepts until Malik understood. He didn't scold or rush him. He encouraged him, celebrated small victories, and reminded him that progress mattered more than speed. Slowly, Malik began to improve. Reading became easier, writing became less intimidating, and his confidence grew. But Pastor James knew that academic support was only part of the solution. Malik needed to feel safe and valued in every part of his life, so he invited him to church events, community programs, and even small gatherings with families from the congregation. At first, Malik felt out of place. He had spent so much time alone that being around people who smiled, laughed, and shared warmth felt almost strange. But Pastor James never forced him. He simply included him gently, and over time, Malik started to feel like he belonged. One afternoon, Pastor James noticed Malik sitting quietly during a church meeting, sketching in a notebook. Curious, he leaned over and asked, "What are you drawing, Malik?" Malik hesitated, then showed him a rough pencil sketch of a small boy standing alone in a big city. Pastor James looked closely and saw the raw emotion in the lines. "This is amazing," he said softly. "You're telling a story with your art. Keep drawing. Let your feelings out on paper. It can help you understand yourself and the world." From that day on, Pastor James encouraged Malik to explore his interests. He bought him sketchbooks, pencils, and paints. He even arranged for Malik to meet local artists who could teach him techniques and give guidance. Slowly, Malik discovered that art was not just a hobby. It was a way to express himself, to process the pain he had carried for so long, and to dream about a future he hadn't dared to imagine. Even as Malik found his creative voice, life remained difficult. Sometimes he would feel anger and frustration bubbling up inside him. He missed his parents, he missed the stability he never had, and he still feared that everything could disappear in an instant. Pastor James never told him to ignore these feelings. Instead, he taught Malik how to face them, to talk about them, and to transform them into motivation rather than letting them hold him back. "You're stronger than you think," Pastor James said one evening as they walked home from a tutoring session. "Every time you overcome something, no matter how small, you're building yourself into someone who can face the world without fear. And you're never alone in that journey." Malik began to understand. He realized that Pastor James wasn't just giving him food or shelter. He was teaching him how to navigate life, how to handle pain, and how to keep hope alive even in the darkest times. Every conversation, every lesson, every moment of attention mattered. It was slowly shaping him into a young man who could face challenges with courage. Over time, the community also began to notice Malik's progress. Volunteers at the church, neighbors who once ignored him on the streets, and even other children who had seen him struggle started to treat him differently. They saw a boy who was learning, growing, and striving to be better. Pastor James used these opportunities to teach Malik about gratitude and humility. "Remember, Malik," he would say, "it's not about proving people wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you can rise above your circumstances. People will notice, but your purpose is your own." Malik began to embrace these lessons. He volunteered at church programs, helping younger kids with homework or guiding them in drawing classes. At first, it was awkward. He had never been in a position to help anyone, but Pastor James encouraged him, reminding him that sharing kindness and knowledge was another way to grow and heal. Schoolwork improved, and so did Malik's self-esteem. He started to dream bigger. He wanted to finish high school, go to college, and maybe one day help kids like himself who were struggling on the streets. Pastor James supported these dreams wholeheartedly, introducing Malik to local mentors, providing resources for scholarships, and connecting him with programs that could help him prepare for a future beyond the city's shelters. But what mattered most to Malik wasn't just the material help or the mentorship. It was the sense of being valued, being seen, and being loved unconditionally. Pastor James never judged him for his past. He never made him feel like his life had to fit a certain mold. Instead, he celebrated Malik's unique qualities, encouraged his passions, and made him believe that he had worth beyond what he had suffered. There were tough days, of course. Days when Malik felt lonely, frustrated, or hopeless. But Pastor James's presence was a steady anchor. He reminded Malik that setbacks were part of life, and that resilience was built through facing challenges, not avoiding them. Every time Malik stumbled, Pastor James helped him up, not with criticism, but with encouragement and practical guidance. Slowly, Malik's world expanded. He made friends, learned new skills, and discovered a sense of purpose. The streets that once defined him no longer had control over his life. He was building a foundation, brick by brick, for a future that was no longer dictated by circumstance but by choice. By the end of this period, Malik had transformed in small but significant ways. He could walk through the city without fear, carry himself with quiet confidence, and face daily life challenges with a growing sense of hope. And through it all, Pastor James remained his guide, mentor, and friend, never letting him forget that one person's belief in him could change everything. This was more than survival. It was growth, healing, and the beginning of a story that would continue to unfold in ways neither of them could yet imagine. Malik's life was no longer defined by fear or hardship, but by potential, courage, and the steady influence of a man who chose to care when no one else would. Years passed, and Malik grew into a young man, strong and determined, shaped by the guidance and care he had received from Pastor James. The boy who once shivered on a cold bench in the park was now taller, more confident, and full of dreams he had never dared to imagine as a child. Yet the streets of his past were never far from his mind. He often remembered the fear, the loneliness, and the uncertainty he had faced every day. Those memories, though painful, became the fuel for his ambition and the reason he wanted to create a better future for himself. School had become easier for him. Over time, the struggle to catch up turned into a drive to excel. Malik discovered he had a talent for numbers and problem-solving, and he began to dream about a career where he could help others, especially young people who were struggling like he once did. Every achievement reminded him of Pastor James's words, that he was capable of more than he had ever imagined, and that one person's belief in him could change everything. Despite the progress, Malik knew he had to leave the city to pursue his education. A scholarship opportunity had come up at a college several hours away, and after careful consideration, he decided it was time to go. The day he packed his few belongings and prepared to leave was quiet, but heavy with emotion. Pastor James was there to see him off, offering advice, encouragement, and a quiet sense of pride. "You've come so far, Malik," Pastor James said, holding his hand for a moment longer than usual. "But remember, this is just the beginning. Keep working hard, stay true to yourself, and never forget where you came from. And if you ever need guidance or support, I will always be here." Malik nodded, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. Leaving the city meant leaving behind the community that had nurtured him, the shelter of the church, and most importantly, Pastor James, who had become more than a mentor. He had become a father figure. The thought of being alone in a new city was frightening, but he knew this was a step he had to take to build the life he wanted. College life was challenging at first. Malik was suddenly surrounded by students who had grown up with privileges and opportunities he had never known. He sometimes felt out of place, doubting himself and questioning whether he truly belonged. There were moments when he missed the simplicity of the life he had in the city, despite its hardships. But he remembered Pastor James's teachings. Setbacks are part of the journey, and resilience is built through facing difficulties. Malik began to work even harder. He attended extra tutoring sessions, joined study groups, and spent late nights in the library learning as much as he could. Slowly, the doubts that had once held him back began to fade. He realized that his past, as painful as it had been, had made him resilient, adaptable, and determined, qualities that others around him often lacked. He started to see his background not as a disadvantage, but as a source of strength. Even though he was busy with his studies, Malik never forgot the lessons of compassion and giving back that Pastor James had taught him. He volunteered at local community centers and youth programs whenever he could, sharing his story with other kids who were struggling. He understood how powerful it was to have someone believe in you when the world seemed to have forgotten you. And every time he helped someone, he felt a connection to Pastor James, as if the mentorship he had received was being passed forward. During these years, Malik and Pastor James kept in touch through letters, phone calls, and occasional visits during school breaks. Pastor James would ask about his studies, offer advice on life choices, and remind him of the importance of staying grounded and humble. Malik cherished these conversations. They were a lifeline that reminded him that no matter how far he went, he was never truly alone. But life also brought challenges that Malik hadn't anticipated. He struggled with balancing his studies, part-time jobs, and volunteering. There were nights when he felt exhausted, overwhelmed, and uncertain about whether he could continue. In those moments, he would think about the boy he once was, sitting alone on the park bench, and he would draw strength from the fact that he had already overcome so much. One evening, after a particularly grueling week of exams and work shifts, Malik sat quietly in his small apartment, reflecting on how far he had come. He thought about the cold mornings on the streets, the meals he had shared at the church, and the countless hours Pastor James had spent encouraging him. He realized that every challenge he had faced had prepared him for this moment, to face the world with courage, to pursue his dreams relentlessly, and to honor the sacrifices that had been made for him. As Malik approached the end of his college years, he began to think more seriously about his future. He wanted to work in a field that allowed him to help others, especially children and young adults who were facing hardships similar to those he had experienced. He dreamed of creating programs that would provide mentorship, education, and resources to kids who were struggling on the streets, just as Pastor James had done for him. Malik also felt a growing desire to repay the kindness that had been shown to him. Pastor James had given him so much more than food, clothing, or shelter. He had given him hope, guidance, and belief in himself. Malik wanted to find a way to honor that, not out of obligation, but out of gratitude and a desire to continue the cycle of giving. The idea of one day returning to the city and making a meaningful impact at the church and in the community filled him with purpose. Despite the distance, Malik's connection with Pastor James remained strong. They spoke often about life, dreams, and challenges. Pastor James would share stories of the church, the children they were helping, and the community's ongoing struggles. Malik listened, inspired and motivated by the thought that his mentor's work continued to touch so many lives. He promised himself that he would contribute in any way he could when the time was right. Graduation day arrived, a moment of triumph and reflection for Malik. Walking across the stage to receive his diploma, he felt a mix of pride, relief, and gratitude. He thought about the boy he had been, the one who had shivered on a park bench, unsure if anyone cared. He remembered Pastor James's warm smile, the sandwiches, the coat, and the endless patience. Every lesson, every conversation, every act of kindness had led him to this point. After the ceremony, Malik sat quietly in the empty lecture hall, thinking about the next steps in his life. He had opportunities, connections, and a clear vision for the future, but he knew that none of it would have been possible without the foundation Pastor James had built for him. It was more than mentorship. It was a lifeline, a bridge from a life of uncertainty to a life filled with purpose and hope. Malik began to plan his return to the city. He wanted to reconnect with Pastor James, to show him how far he had come and to find ways to support the church and the programs that had nurtured him.
He envisioned a day when he could stand beside Pastor James, not as a boy in need,
but as a young man ready to give back, to help others, and to continue the cycle of compassion. Even though he was miles away, Malik felt a strong sense of responsibility. He knew that the kindness he had received was rare, and he wanted to make sure it continued. He dreamed of mentoring children, supporting educational programs, and creating opportunities for those who, like him, had once been forgotten by the world. Malik's journey had been long and filled with obstacles, but every challenge had shaped him into someone capable of not only surviving but thriving. He had learned the value of perseverance, the power of compassion, and the importance of never forgetting those who helped him along the way. Every step had prepared him for the moment when he would one day return to Pastor James, ready to honor the man who had changed his life forever. And so, as Malik prepared to leave college and step into the next chapter of his life, he carried with him a heart full of gratitude, a mind focused on purpose, and a dream that had been nurtured by the unwavering belief of a man who had once simply noticed a boy sitting alone on a park bench. He was ready for the future, but he never forgot the past, and he never forgot the man who had made that future possible. The city had changed a lot since Malik had left for college. The streets still carried the familiar hum of traffic, the chatter of people, and the occasional laughter of children playing in the parks. But to Malik, everything felt different now. He walked through the streets with purpose, no longer the boy who had shivered on a cold bench, no longer invisible to the world around him. He was a young man with confidence, determination, and a deep sense of gratitude that he carried in his heart. Malik's first stop was the church where Pastor James had first helped him all those years ago. The building looked familiar yet different, as if it had grown alongside the community it served. The front doors opened to the warm, comforting smell of candles and polished wood, and Malik felt a wave of memories wash over him. The long conversations, the meals, the lessons, and the quiet moments when he had felt seen and valued for the first time in his life. He stepped inside, and for a moment he simply stood there taking it all in. The church was alive with activity. Children laughed in the back, volunteers moved quietly through the aisles, and Pastor James stood near the front speaking gently to a small group of people. Malik's heart leapt when he saw him. It had been years, but the pastor's presence was unmistakable. "Pastor James," Malik called out, his voice trembling slightly with emotion. The pastor turned, and for a moment his eyes widened in recognition. Then a broad smile spread across his face. "Malik?" he said, almost in disbelief. Malik ran toward him and the two embraced. It was a hug that spoke volumes. Years of memories, challenges, and growth wrapped into a single moment. Pastor James held Malik tightly, feeling a mixture of pride, relief, and joy. The boy he had once helped was now a young man, and he had not only survived but thrived. After the embrace, they stepped back and looked at each other, both smiling. Malik's eyes glistened with tears. "I've missed this place," he said softly. "I've missed you." Pastor James placed a hand on his shoulder. "I've missed you too, Malik. I always hoped you'd come back one day, but seeing you here like this, it's more than I could have imagined." They spent the afternoon walking through the church and the surrounding community, catching up on years that had passed. Malik shared stories of college, the challenges he had faced, the lessons he had learned, and the dreams he had for the future. Pastor James listened intently, nodding, laughing, and occasionally wiping a tear from his eye. He had always known Malik had potential, but seeing it realized in this way filled him with a sense of fulfillment he had rarely experienced. Malik also took time to meet the current volunteers and children at the church. He shared his story with them, telling them about the struggles he had faced and the ways in which Pastor James had helped him. The children listened with wide eyes, inspired by his journey and the hope it represented. Malik's story was not just about personal success. It was about the power of kindness, mentorship, and the ripple effect of compassion. After the tour, they sat down in Pastor James's office, a small room filled with books, photographs, and reminders of the many lives the church had touched. Malik took a deep breath. "Pastor James," he began, "I've been thinking about how much you've done for me, and I've been trying to figure out how I can ever repay you. I want to help, to give back, to make sure that what you started doesn't end with me." Pastor James shook his head gently. "Malik, you don't owe me anything. Everything I did was because it was the right thing to do. Seeing you succeed is more than enough repayment." Malik smiled, but he shook his head. "I know you don't expect anything, but I want to. I want to give back to the church, to the programs that helped me, to the kids who are still struggling out there. I want to make a difference, just like you did for me." Pastor James looked at him, pride and humility mingling in his expression. "That's exactly the spirit I hoped you would carry. But remember, it's not about money or recognition. It's about your heart, your time, and your willingness to keep helping others. That's how you repay kindness, by sharing it." Malik nodded. "I understand, and I want to start now." Over the next few days, Malik worked with Pastor James and the church team to develop a plan. He wanted to create programs that would support homeless youth, offering mentorship, education, and resources to help them succeed. He also wanted to provide scholarships and opportunities for kids who had dreams, but lacked the means to achieve them. Pastor James guided him, offering advice from years of experience. But Malik's energy, ideas, and determination were undeniable. One evening, as they sat together reviewing plans, Malik looked at Pastor James and said, "You gave me a chance when no one else did. You saw something in me that I didn't even see in myself. I want to make sure other kids get that same chance. I want them to know that someone believes in them, just like you believed in me." Pastor James smiled softly. "And you're going to do it, Malik. You have the heart, the skills, and the drive. Just remember to stay humble, patient, and persistent. Change doesn't happen overnight, but with dedication you can touch countless lives." Malik spent the next few weeks deeply involved in the community. He met with families, volunteers, and local organizations, sharing his story and inspiring others to join the cause. His presence alone was a powerful reminder of what mentorship and compassion could achieve. People who had once struggled to see hope now saw a tangible example of success, someone who had risen from hardship to make a meaningful difference. Every evening, Malik returned to the church office to talk with Pastor James, discussing progress, ideas, and future plans. These conversations were more than work. They were a continuation of the mentorship that had begun years ago. Malik learned not only how to create programs, but also how to lead with empathy, patience, and integrity. Pastor James's wisdom and experience became a guiding force, shaping Malik's approach to helping others. One afternoon, Malik took a moment to reflect on his journey. Standing in the park where he had first met Pastor James, he looked around at the bustling city and thought about the boy he once was. He remembered the cold, the hunger, the fear, and the loneliness. And he remembered the warmth, the guidance, and the hope that had been offered to him. He realized that every step of his journey, every challenge, and every act of kindness had led him to this moment, standing as a young man ready to give back and make a difference. Malik knew that his return was more than a personal reunion. It was a symbol of hope for the community. His story showed that even in the face of hardship, compassion could transform lives. It demonstrated that one person's belief in another could create ripples that spread far beyond what anyone could imagine. And it reminded everyone that kindness, when shared, has the power to create lasting change. By the time Malik had fully settled back into the city, the church and community programs were thriving. Children received support, mentorship, and resources, and families felt hope and encouragement. Malik's presence had reinvigorated the community, inspiring others to contribute their time, energy, and resources. Pastor James watched with pride, seeing the boy he had once helped now leading the charge to help countless others. In the quiet moments, Malik and Pastor James would sit together, reflecting on the journey they had shared. They spoke of the past, the struggles, the lessons learned, and the dreams yet to be fulfilled. These conversations were filled with gratitude, humility, and a shared understanding of the impact they had made, not just on Malik's life, but on the lives of many others. One evening, as the sun set over the city, Malik turned to Pastor James and said, "I know I can never fully repay you, but I promise to keep your spirit alive in everything I do. I will help as many kids as I can, just like you helped me." Pastor James placed a hand on his shoulder, his eyes shining with emotion. "That's all I could ever hope for, Malik. That's more than repayment. That's legacy." And in that moment, both mentor and mentee knew that their journey was far from over. Malik had returned not only to repay kindness, but to continue the cycle, to ensure that hope, guidance, and love reached every child who needed it. The boy who had once been alone and forgotten had become a young man who would now change lives, carrying forward the light that Pastor James had first ignited in him. Malik's return to the city marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for him, but for the community he had once called home. He had come back with more than gratitude in his heart. He carried a vision, a plan, and an unshakable desire to make a lasting difference. The church where Pastor James had welcomed him years ago became the center of that vision, a place where hope could be shared, and lives could be transformed. From the very first day, Malik immersed himself in the work. He helped organize programs for children, offering tutoring, mentorship, and creative workshops. He shared his own experiences with the young kids, not to boast, but to show them that no matter how difficult life might seem, there was always a path forward. Every time a child smiled because they had learned something new, or every time a young person expressed hope for their future, Malik felt a deep sense of purpose. He realized that the kindness he had once received could now ripple outward, touching countless lives. Pastor James watched Malik with pride. He saw the boy he had once helped transform into a young man who was capable, compassionate, and wise beyond his years. Malik didn't just replicate the support he had received. He expanded it, bringing new ideas, energy, and resources to the programs. It was clear that his own journey of struggle had given him empathy, resilience, and creativity, qualities that he now used to inspire others. One afternoon, Malik met with a group of volunteers to discuss expanding the mentorship program. "We can't just focus on education," he said, his voice calm but firm. "We need to provide emotional support, skills for life, and opportunities that show these kids they are not alone. We need to help them believe in themselves." The volunteers nodded, impressed by Malik's passion and clarity. They had seen him grow from a quiet, uncertain young man into a leader who understood the power of hope and guidance. His personal story gave him credibility, and his humility made him approachable. Every word he spoke carried the weight of experience, and it resonated deeply with everyone in the room. Malik also focused on long-term solutions. He worked to establish scholarships for students, ensuring that kids who were struggling financially could continue their education without fear. He partnered with local businesses and organizations to create internships and opportunities for employment. Malik knew that giving temporary aid was important, but providing tools for lasting independence and success was essential. Throughout this time, Malik maintained a close relationship with Pastor James. They spent evenings together planning events, reviewing progress and sharing memories. Sometimes they simply sat quietly, reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. Malik often thought about the day he had first met Pastor James, sitting on a cold park bench, and he felt a profound sense of gratitude. That single act of kindness had changed the trajectory of his life, and now he had the chance to honor it by giving back. Malik also took time to meet with families in the community. He listened to their concerns, offered guidance, and provided support in practical ways. He helped parents understand how to encourage their children, how to create a positive environment, and how to instill hope in young hearts. His approach was gentle yet determined, always emphasizing the value of persistence, love, and belief in oneself. The church began to see remarkable results. Children who had once struggled with confidence were now thriving in school. Young people who had faced uncertainty and hardship were discovering their talents and dreams. Parents reported feeling more connected to their community and more empowered to support their children. Malik's presence, combined with Pastor James's continued guidance, had created a culture of encouragement and possibility. One day, Malik organized a community celebration, inviting families, volunteers, and supporters. The event was filled with laughter, music, and stories of success. Malik shared his own journey openly, emphasizing that while his path had been difficult, every challenge had been an opportunity to grow. He encouraged others to believe in themselves and to help those around them, just as he had been helped. Pastor James stood nearby, watching Malik speak to the crowd. He felt a mixture of pride, joy, and humility. He had once offered food, clothing, and guidance to a young boy, never imagining that one day Malik would return with the power to inspire an entire community. The pastor realized that the greatest gift he had given was not material. It was belief, love, and unwavering support. And seeing Malik embody those values was a reward beyond words. Malik also understood the importance of gratitude. He made sure to acknowledge the volunteers, donors, and supporters who had helped make the programs possible. He emphasized that no single person could change the world alone, but together, through compassion and commitment, they could create a lasting impact. His leadership was marked by humility, empathy, and a focus on collective effort, qualities that made him respected and admired by all who worked alongside him. As months turned into years, Malik's initiatives continued to grow. More children received mentorship, more families were supported, and more opportunities were created for youth in the city. The ripple effect of Pastor James's kindness had multiplied many times over, reaching far beyond what anyone could have imagined. Malik knew that the work was never truly done, but he also understood that progress, no matter how small, was meaningful. In quieter moments, Malik reflected on his journey. He remembered the fear and loneliness he had felt on the streets, the uncertainty of not knowing where he would sleep or what he would eat, and the countless nights of doubt. He remembered the warmth of Pastor James's coat, the kindness of a simple meal, and the patience of someone who refused to give up on him. Those memories fueled his dedication to helping others, reminding him that one act of kindness could change a life forever. Malik also realized that giving back was not just about repayment. It was about creating a legacy. He wanted the programs he